Welcome back to GMQC at 11. It is Plants and Gardens time with Craig Hignite, and it's your special day. Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Happy birthday.
It doesn't happen very often, although a few years ago, I actually was on vacation in the Caribbean on Super Bowl Sunday.
Oh.
And how lovely.
And it was my birthday then, too.
Yeah.
Oh, goodness.
How are you feeling? That's the question.
Not bad. Just cut me in half and count the rings. I'm into dendrology.
Oh, we'll eat the other donuts and whatnot.
We'll believe you. Alrighty.
Yeah. Well, let's get to some of the questions. So this first one says, I was given true Christmas cactus cuttings, planted them, and they are wrinkly, but what do I do?
Okay, just don't overwater them. Depending on how long they've been in the pot, if it's been more than 3 or 4 weeks, they should actually tug back a little bit when you try and lift them out of the soil. Run them to the dry side. It is almost impossible to kill a Christmas cactus from lack of water. Get them over into a sunny window too. They're stressed right now. They need as much light as they can get.
Oh, relatable, Craig. And so then Karen asked, I didn't get my knockout roses trimmed last fall. How far should I trim them, and when this spring?
Anytime. Anytime now that we're past the first of the year. And I would take them down to about 12, 15 inches, about knee high above the ground. They'll all come from the bottom just beautifully next spring.
What are some telltale signs that an evergreen tree is dying?
Well, the first sign is that they turn brown. The second sign is that they do not pass the scratch test, where you start at the tip of the branch, nick it with your thumbnail. If it's dried out like a toothpick, go in a little bit further until you come to live wood. This time of the year, don't get carried away. A lot of evergreens turn somewhat brown during the winter. They'll green up as soon as the weather warms up in the spring.
And then we have Lindsay asking, if someone wanted to start an indoor garden, what sort of things would they consider regarding during setup?
Well, the first thing you need is a well-draining pots, always with drainage holes, a well-draining soil, and plenty of light. Remember that all of these plants, they're not shade plants out in the garden, so they need as much light. You might want to look into setting up an artificial light setup if you're going to do indoor gardening.
All right, this one. How often do I water my aloe plant? Do I let it get totally dry first?
Well, I don't think I would let an aloe go totally dry. Of course, they are a succulent, and they are about 99% water themselves. You will let it dry out better than a normal house plant. I would say when the pot is dry about 1/3 down, it is time to water. Water thoroughly, drain the excess, always. And again, they need plenty of light. Being a succulent, they're a very high light plant. Oh, and like all plants, we want to give them that quarter turn every 3 or 4 days, because they are going to pull toward the best light, and you don't want them laying over the side of their pot.
And we have Jennifer Summers, who used to be our digital person here. She's now in St. Louis. Hi, Jen.
Yeah.
She said, any tips for preserving cut flowers for Valentine's Day?
Okay, there are things you can do. One, you always want to use clean water. I would be putting a floral preservative in the water. Recut the flowers after you get them so that they can take up the water, and check them every 3, 4, 5 days and replace the water with fresh water with preservative in them. If you're going to try and preserve them for the long run, after you've enjoyed them for several days, I would actually take them out of the water and let them dry out on their own. And believe me, the house is so dry this time of the year, it's going to take no time at all for that to happen.
All right, and really quickly, when can I prune a maple tree, this says?
Maple tree, anytime now. And I'd get it done sooner than later. They pull up their sap very early in the spring, so if you get it done now while the ground is still very cold, that cut is going to dry out so it doesn't bleed too much when the sap finally comes up in the spring.
Great. Well, we are going to quickly go into break, but we'll be right back answering all your questions.
Welcome back to Good Morning Quad Cities at 11. We have Craig Hicknight, our Plants and Gardens expert, and on his birthday joining us. We appreciate it. Let's continue on with the questions. What is the best flowering vine in our area?
Oh, some of the best vines are the morning glories, the moonflower vine. For a tropical, I always love the mandevilla. The climbing hydrangea is nice. Also, the climbing honeysuckles. You know, and those last two are perennial in this area. You don't have to replace them each year.
And we have Gail who asked, we have a snake plant that is dying. What's going on?
Well, any number of things. One, the first thing I always worry about is overwatering. Make sure that you're letting it dry out properly. Secondly, if it's been in the pot for a long time, maybe you actually have a mineral buildup in the soil. And what happens, the minerals build up in the soil where there are more minerals in the soil than in the plant, so the water actually runs backwards. You can have all the water available to the plant. It can't take it up because there's too many minerals in the soil. So maybe a repotting would be necessary for this plant to give it a new lease on life, fresh soil, and as always, a little more sun would never hurt.
And this one says, what to do if my weed and feed feeder dumped over and now has yellow spots? Is my grass dead?
It is probably dead. What it is with that extremely high dose of chemicals that have been on the lawn, it's really a matter, you could go into that area and literally remove about the top 6 to 8 inches of soil in that area, get rid of it, put it in the garden somewhere and let it mellow out, replace it with fresh soil, and then either seed or sod over the top of that. You have to get rid of that huge chemical dump, and Mother Nature will take care of it eventually, but it's going to take a while to leach those minerals out of the soil.
Well, first off, Sherry and Teresa and Steve say happy birthday.
Yeah.
And then we
you.
have, let's see, so Teresa also asked, deer are in our area. What plants are good to plant that are deer resistant?
Okay, as far as the spring flowering bulbs, the most deer resistant are the daffodils. For annuals, I always like to go with the salvia family. Salvias are basically very deer resistant. And remember, if you've got trees, you've got to remember in the fall to get some cover around the trunk so the deer don't come in and scratch all the bark off when they're cleaning their antlers.
Oh.
Yeah. This one says, what's the best perennial flowering vine in our area?
Well, you know, probably the clematis comes to mind. I mentioned the honeysuckle before, the Campsis radicans, the trumpet vine is very hardy in this area and a good bloomer once it gets established. You have to give them a little while to get established. You know, there are several vines. Those are probably the 3 most common.
And we have, is now a good time to top seed the lawn?
No problem. Remember, that seed is just going to be there until the soil warms up enough that it can germinate. So if you're overseeding, make sure that I've actually had people overseed the lawn and then they'll walk out with football spikes on.
Oh.
And they walk all over the lawn to push that seed down into the ground so it's actually still seed and not bird food for the next couple of months until the grass seed starts to germinate.
Get a pair of shoes like that.
Yeah. This one says, can you start a sunflower plant from the seeds in the middle of a sunflower?
Sure. Sunflowers, most of them are excuse me, self-pollinating, and you can save the seed from one year to the next, especially those great big monsters that you see, the Russian giants. Now, a lot of the newer sunflowers are hybrids. So the seed is going to be viable, but the babies are not going to look like mom because they're an F1 hybrid to begin with.
Alrighty, that's all the time we have, but thank you so much, Craig, and once again, happy birthday. Thank you for spending it here at WQAD.
And I go back to work on Sunday.
Oh, congrats.
Alrighty.
Yeah. And treat yourself well, right,
So
today?
bored. Well, have a good birthday, Craig,
Thank
and
you.
we will be right back after this break.